we are announcing we filed criminal charges in the Flint water crisis against 3 individuals. These charges are only the beginning, and there'll be more to come.
That the Michigan Attorney General announcing the charges against 2 state workers as well as a city worker in Flint. Now, you've heard him, and he's not done yet. 2 of the men, as we said, work for Michigan. The third one for Flint. The charges include misleading federal regulatory officials, manipulating water sampling, and tampering with evidence. By now, we all know what happened there. Michigan decided to save money 2 years ago by switching Flint's water supply from Lake Huron to Flint River. Problem is, that river, as everyone knew, polluted, and the water was not being properly treated. So now it comes down to who knew what and when, and whether government workers will in fact go to jail over it. Now, could this case set a precedent that municipal employees everywhere will be watching and potentially be worried about? And for me, Jimmy, you'll always see maybe civil compensation for folks, but criminal charges, okay, criminally here, that these folks had the foresight to know what they were doing was both dangerous and reckless. When brought to their attention, they didn't try to remedy this situation, and they all did it for the almighty buck. Clearly, they wouldn't have done it in Grosse Pointe, but they do it in Flint, in Michigan. There was always somewhat, if not immunity, the idea that the government wouldn't criminally be looking at something like this. This so bad, though, could this also be a game changer in how we look at government and their responsibilities, not just civilly, but criminally as well?
I don't know if it would necessarily be a game changer. I would like to think that when any government and municipality uncovers this egregious, this damaging, this dangerous to human life conduct, that they would pursue it criminally. But you have to think that things are changing around the country. You know, you've got the Southern District United States Attorney going after these politicians for what many have called business as usual. Is that a game changer? It's a game changer because the business needs to change. Is it going to make these officials more aware and more responsible? One would hope so. But whether it's a game changer or not, I would hope not. I would hope that you would always see criminal charges from conduct this egregious.
It might be a tough case to prove because, as our friend Doug always talks about, especially with asbestos, you see sick people, you see obviously clusters of people that are sick. Common sense says, you know, A plus B equals C, but the argument is sometimes you got to wait decades to be able to have a true finding as to how and why they got sick. Nor am I trying to be a scientist in this particular case, but it may be easier to charge than convict, right?
Well, in the ordinary case, in this sort of regulatory offense context, it's very difficult to obtain a criminal conviction because the line between negligent conduct and criminally culpable conduct is so enigmatic. But in this case, they charged it in an unusual way, which might make it easier to prove. So there are substantive charges of official misconduct and conspiracy charges, and then there are evidence tampering charges, which can be used to show a guilty conscience, which in turn can show that they had
the knowledge. Is the worst thing they did, Mark, not trying to shave a few bucks here by giving them dirty water, but when it was made clear to them that people were getting sick as a consequence, they neither ran it up the flagpole, but they also tried to cover it up.
Well, the cover-up is always worse, right? But let's be clear about shaving a few bucks, right? They're not shaving a few bucks to put it into their pocket, which is usually the hallmark of these kinds of cases. They have a mandate from the governor to save money on the budget because Flint is in bankruptcy and default, and I think that operates in their favor. They're not profiteering off this.
I mean, they say it's not the crime, it's the cover-up. Here, the cover-up is the major crime. I mean, you're talking about a felony for tampering with evidence versus a misdemeanor just for being neglectful at your job. So really the bulk of those criminal charges, it's the cover-up.
But now we're talking about municipals, cities here, and a state potentially. Forget about a governor being removed for office. We've seen that before. Forget about corrupt politicians cuffed and stuffed and they're going away. This is about people doing the work of the people. And there's a lot of states right now that are facing budget crisis. For them to prioritize certain populations over certain other ones, I wonder if you have a case where it's less egregious than this, I mean, this was horrible. I mean, this went on forever. People were told the water was brown here. Kids were sick, pregnancies impacted, all these things. And
Right,
they
so
knew
someone
and they
could get
covered it
away
up.
with it.
But I'm saying if it's a little less obvious and they use bad discretion in terms of prioritizing budgetary allocations, is that criminal too?
Well, it's the line that Mark is talking about. You know, if it's less obvious, if you're not sure, if the evidence is not that clear, and maybe you should have looked harder, or maybe you ignored a risk, but in a
Right.
negligent way, that's one thing. But this seems to go way over that line, where you are told in no uncertain terms you're dropping poison into the water that the citizens are drinking, and then they cover that up.
Yep.
That's the line that Mark's talking
Whether
about.
it's wealthy communities or poor communities,
Right.
there's never an
Yeah,
excuse
Amy,
for
I
that.
want to get to this next one, which is, you may have seen this in the Times, okay? And it's a problem not just on the BYU campus, but a lot of other college campuses. Obviously, I'm talking about sexual assaults. But at Brigham Young University, it can get pretty complicated. In that Times story, some rape victims are actually the ones who are getting penalized. Now, that's because during the course of investigations, they sometimes admit to violating the quote-unquote school honor code. That is a code that entering freshmen all have to sign that prohibits, among other things, drug use, drinking, premarital sex, and other things. Now, sometimes the woman, they admit to doing something that's banned, and they, in turn, can get suspended. And Amy, in this particular case, the young woman admitted to taking a drug before an encounter with a guy who she claims had raped her. During the course, and she went forward with it to the school, during the course of the investigation, the school said, well, you engaged in improper activity here, and she was suspended as a consequence. It's kind of like the poison fruit. Everything that happens after that in the school's deranged logic almost doesn't matter. You shouldn't have done that in the first place. The kids are signing this willingly. No one's making them go to the college. It doesn't matter that I disagree with it. Does it follow that if you do something you shouldn't do, what happens after it doesn't exempt you from punishment?
Well, first of all, with the kids signing, I mean, how many times does an adult even look at what they're signing, especially when they're about to enter into a place where they're excited? I mean, you think these teenagers are reading?
An honor code is a little different than signing up for a phone plan. You clearly know what you can and can't do. And by the way, at military academies, there's similar things to this as well.
So what the school is trying to do is say that these are two distinct episodes. If somebody sexually assaults you, we're going to punish them. But then if you commit wrongdoing and you violate the honor code, we're going to punish you too. But I mean, obviously they're related because somebody's not going to want to come forward if they feel that they're going to be punished. But I think really what's going on here is that this is a Mormon institution. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the bulk of the people who are funding this institution are Mormons, or at least accept their religious beliefs. So, you know, they have to please the people who are funding them. And that's what this is about. Why do you think all the other universities have amnesty clauses in there that say that if somebody is sexually assaulted or raped, we're going to overlook what they did, if they did a little drugs, if they, you know, if they engaged in sex with that person beforehand? That doesn't justify that they be raped after.
I just, you know, I don't get the religious component of that, because if that, and I agree with you, but so what does that mean? That the Mormon funders of BYU have decided, listen, it's okay to rape somebody if the person you rape had a drink or something. No, but it is. But I'm sorry, the effect of it is just that. Because if these women can't come forward to report a rape because they may have violated...
they're going to be subjected to discipline potentially for the lesser violation.
They're going to be suspended, and my understanding is nothing really happens to the perpetrators.
But it happens the same way in the service academy, and of course I agree with Amy. It's obviously a deterrent to coming forward, and it has a chilling effect on reporting. But imagine the person who does come forward, what that person's lawyer has to vouch for that person's credibility. Look, she was brave enough to come forward despite all these adverse consequences. You know she's telling the truth, and that's an open and shut case right there.
The doctrine basically says that if somebody is doing drugs, if somebody is engaged in activity that's not allowed under the honor code, that they're bringing this upon themselves. And that's not necessarily what all Mormons think.
Kids assaulted, comes forward, and you're thrown out of school, suspended as a consequence.
So
it doesn't
no
make
other
sense.
kids in the future are going to come forward, and these perpetrators are just going to be allowed to do
on that
that.
uplifting note here, guys.
Maybe it's a disincentive to false allegations as well.
On that note, guys, thank you all very much. I appreciate it. I got local headlines straight ahead. We'll be right back.